Welcome to the Church Leaders Podcast, conversations with today's top ministry leaders to help you lead better every day. And now podcasting from scenic Colorado Springs, Colorado, here's your host, Jason Day.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another great week here on the Church Leaders Podcast. I am your host, Jason Day, and I had a conversation with Jeannie Gaffigan this week. Jeannie is a writer, producer, mom of 5 children, and wife of comedian Jim Gaffigan. A few years ago, her world was absolutely rocked when she was diagnosed with a brain tumor that needed immediate surgery. Jeannie shares her story of faith and family in her book, When Life Gives You Pears, The Healing Power of Family, Faith, and Funny People. On this week's episode, Jeannie and I discuss how her faith in God helped her through her brain surgery and her recovery, and how it can help us all through the challenging times we are facing. Jeannie shares how a city squirrel in her Manhattan apartment taught her a valuable lesson about life and why humor helps us keep things in perspective. Jeannie also shares what she learned about motherhood and marriage through her ordeal and why gratitude is a key part of her daily life. So now, won't you please join me in my conversation with Jeannie Gaffigan. Jeannie, it's such a pleasure to have you with us. Welcome to the Church Leaders Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You know, it's interesting times we find ourselves in. As we're recording this, we're in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. And as a father myself of 6 kids, I know the challenges that these stay-at-home orders and kind of quarantine have been for our family. Now, you and Jim, you have 5 children, and you guys live in New York City, which is the epicenter of the outbreak here in the U.S. So I just want to check in. How are you and Jim and the family doing?
Well, we are, taking it day by day. I have the blessing, really, of being in really close contact with some medical staff on the front lines in one of the ICUs here. So it really helps me put my frustrations and challenges of being under the shelter-at-home orders in perspective. So every time I want to complain about, basically running a diner all day, I'm just finishing cleaning up breakfast and people want lunch, and then I'm being tech support for 5 Zoom meetings, and we didn't homeschool. So when the kids went to school, that's when I did the work. So I have the same experience that's going on with a lot of parents who are sheltered at home with even with smaller families. I've connected with a lot of people who are having the same kind of challenges where your work continues. You are constantly rescheduling and trying to make do with the new cancellations of all the events. In addition to I'm operating a couple of charities right now. I'm supporting other organizations who are in a crisis. Mm-hmm. And I'm also managing the homeschooling, which is new for me. And I am also trying to cook and clean all day in laundry. So it's like, I know I can handle all 3 jobs, but it's not like one job ends and the next job starts. And it's just simultaneously that's a real challenge for me. So many times during the day, I find myself getting impatient with my kids, getting impatient with my husband, getting impatient with, just in general with work and communicating with others. And then I'm reminded of what actually is happening right now. That is a absolutely unprecedented amount of pain and suffering. Mm-hmm. And to add insult to injury, the suffering that is happening right now is unique in that when people are deathly ill or dying, they cannot be their family. Mm-hmm. And the people that they're experiencing in the ICU are covered from head to toe in protective gear. So it's not like they're even making eye contact or having, personal interactions.
Right.
And so that is a reminder to me of the gratitude and the positive things that are happening in my life, in other people's families, and in the world, really. And I think that also as a Christian, one of the things that we should wake up every morning and do is express our gratitude. Because no matter how bad things seem, it could be so much worse. And, I think that my experience and what I wrote about in my memoir, When Life Gives You Pears, is that when these things happen to us in our lives that are would normally cause someone to despair, we have to remember there's a bigger picture. There's a bigger picture to this suffering that we're going through right now. There's something in the plan that we might not be able to see right now. But if we can just trust God and trust that this experience is helping us grow in some way as not only individuals, but as a city, as a country, as a world, if we can look at that, if we can try to find the gratitude in this crisis, we're going to get through it. And we're going to come out better. And that's what my microcosm of, in my own world, that's my brain tumor. I went through this in a very small way before. And now it's like life gave the world a big pear. When life gives you pear, it's like when life gives you lemons, make lemonade, right?
Right.
So that's a play on words that I use when I got the pear-sized brain tumor. When life gives you pears, what are you going to do? Right? Are you going to just say, why me, God? Why?
Right.
Why not some other guy? Right? Or are we going to say, okay, why did this happen? What can I do to get through it? And how can I improve my faith, my relationships, my life, my spirituality, my soul? How am I being purified by this suffering? And I think that we have to remember, especially, it always happens. My brain tumor situation in 2017 happened during Holy Week. I really feel that there is a message that we all could take right now. This is the highest. This is the biggest part of our faith right now.
Right.
Now, so why is this happening right now? Why are we experiencing this as the human race on this entire planet? No one is exempt from this. What's happening? What can we take from this? So that's what I'm looking at right now.
Yeah, Jeannie, it's as you referenced your diagnosis and your brain tumor. Understand that, and you share this in your book, When Life Gives You Pears, that it was almost like these miraculous type events that even helped you even discover that you had this brain tumor. And then it was to such a degree that you had to have it operated on right away. And I can't imagine, sitting here thinking through is receiving news like that. So how did you initially respond to that diagnosis?
I mean, it was surreal. I mean, it's like when you have a paranoid thought about something like, I think we've all gone through those periods of time where we've had some medical thing happen to us and immediately think it's like cancer or something horrible.
Right.
Or see something on our child and immediately jump to that conclusion. And then, of course, there's somewhere in the back of your head where you're like, well, obviously it can't be this. So I was faced with a situation where I thought I had a hearing problem. Maybe my eardrum was damaged, right? But there was also a part of me that was like, well, maybe my ear's just clogged or something. There was also there was a bad thing, like maybe I'm going deaf. And then there was another part of me that was like, maybe it's just nothing, right?
Right.
And so when I had the MRI and I found out I had a giant mass in my brain, it was just surreal. Like I didn't really grasp it. And then when, I chronicle this whole journey in my book, but when it was confirmed that it was a brain tumor and that I needed to get to the hospital right away. I just jumped into fight mode. I just went right into it. And there was something about my faith that has carried me through the most difficult times in my life that was there for me. And I can't imagine what it would be like for someone who didn't have faith.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine what this situation in the world how would someone process what's going on right now? It's traumatic,
right.
Really. If you don't have that bigger picture. And I tell a story that, and this is also answering your question about how I felt at that moment, of saying like, okay, this is going on. Obviously there's a reason for it. Let's deal with it right now, head on. Let's go. There is a story that I tell that is a very tiny little example, little tiny parable of what this situation how I handled it. I don't want to say fastidious, but I don't like, dirty houses or anything that would, compromise health, such as if I see a bug or a rodent, it's like the end of the world, right? This is like the end of the world. I cannot rest or concentrate on anything else until we get rid of this situation, which is something about me that is not great, right? So we identify parts of ourselves that are not exactly, we're kind of not having faith. We're not having patience. We're not having peace. Right. So these are little tiny things that are about me that are not perfect. Right. So anyway, at some point we were, I don't know if we were watering the window boxes. I live in an apartment in New York City, and somehow like a squirrel or a chipmunk or some sort of large rodent came into my apartment, much to the delight of my 5 children.
Yeah.
This really, because we're not in the country, okay?
Right.
So this thing has been crawling through God knows what, right? And is running all over my house, going into cracks and crevices and disappearing for like an hour. And all I'm thinking is, it's spreading disease all over my house. It's the end of the world. I'm calling every exterminator in New York, and they all are, 2 weeks from tomorrow, we'll call you back. And my kids are all laughing. Where's the chipmunk? Where's the chipmunk? They think Alvin and the chipmunks are in our house. And I am absolutely, a crazy woman. I am like, everyone, wash your hands. I am not peaceful. I am like a crazy maniac monster woman. And essentially, I would say, I don't know, maybe half a day later, the chipmunk makes its appearance again, or the squirrel, or whatever it was. The large, dirty rodent. Not a rat, but it has a big bushy tail and it's running around my house. Makes an appearance, and somehow we all chase it into a bathroom. It winds up in a bathroom. My husband is like, get a box. And we find, an empty box. And he's like, a bigger box. And so Jim gets a broom and sweeps this thing into the box. I don't know how he did it because it was like fast, Gets in the box. Everyone is laughing and screaming and running around. He boxes it up. We all run down the stairs of our apartment building. We run out on the street. He opens the box and the rodent runs free and probably gets run over by a semi-truck like 2 seconds later. But he set it free. And now, and also, by the way, there's a video of this. I think I posted on Instagram. It's crazy, or it's on my YouTube channel. Because, it's all like distorted, the video. It's just a lot of screaming. But it's like when I look back on this moment, it's this wonderful moment where we all work together as a family. And we look back on this moment with of this squirrel thing with just like such delight and such joy and such bonding. And it's like if when you're experiencing the crazy trauma, if you can look ahead and look at the big picture and say, you know what, someday I am going to understand why I'm going through this right now. I know it seems like kind of a silly story to illustrate something, but it's just something that has become very meaningful to me.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm in the middle of some kind of awful crisis, I look to God and I say, God, I don't know why this is happening right now, but I trust someday I am going to understand how this was a valuable experience for me and my family. And I'm going to grow from it, and I'm going to grow closer to you, and I'm going to grow in love. And so that's the way that I have started to live my life. And when this came up, it was, just as horrific as it is for anyone else. And I don't know what's going on in the rest of the country, but at this point, it's now friends. It's now people we know that are in ICUs. There are traumatic stories of running out of equipment. There are there is such a amount of suffering going on right now, and I feel really connected to those people in the ICU because, as you know, if you've read my book, the ICU for me was very traumatic, and it wasn't just the fact that I couldn't eat or drink or enjoy the comforts of being a human being. It was that I couldn't see my children and I couldn't experience touch. Like people weren't touching me unless they were like sticking a needle in my arm or something.
Right.
And I really understood in a way, and obviously I am not comparing myself to Christ at all, but all of a sudden it hit me that when Jesus was suffering on the cross and his mother was looking up at him on that cross, there was also, I'm sure that he wanted a hug. He wanted a touch. He wanted contact. And so there's also deprivation and suffering in not being able to have that human interaction that we so desperately need.
Right.
And it allows us to really rely only on God. And I can only pray that God touches the hearts of these people that are in the ICU, because I had family around me. I could see people, see the doctors. Even if I couldn't move or talk, I could see eyes. I knew what was going on. These people who are suffering right now in the ICUs all over the country and the world are not allowed to see their family. No one can come near them.
Right.
The doctors and nurses and medical staff that are coming in and out are head to toe covered. So it's just, I am praying, and I invite all of you to pray for not only an end to this awful pandemic and a cure. And I ask everyone to pray that God can touch the hearts of the people who are suffering and give the strength to the people who are right there witnessing this horrible suffering. It's got to be traumatic on both sides.
Yeah. It's interesting that you shared that, because in your book you do describe this, agonizing, prolonged time that you spent in ICU yourself. And as you mentioned, the one of the big things was that you couldn't see your kids. You couldn't be with your kids during that time. Did that time that you were in the ICU, did it change your experience of motherhood?
Oh, absolutely. It absolutely did, because I was getting caught up before in the drudgery of motherhood, right?
Right.
I wasn't experiencing the joys of motherhood. And I think that I don't think this is only a female thing. I think that men, fathers can experience this thing too, where you get so much in a grind of getting things done, or being a good father or being a good mother conceptually. but you're not really taking the time to smell your kids' heads and remembering the joy of motherhood. And I think that I would love it if people didn't have to be deprived of it before they could appreciate that.
That's good.
So I'm hoping that when people either read my book or listen to this podcast or whatever, they just take a moment today to, really experience joy, even when you are cleaning up someone wet the bed, right?
Right. Yeah.
Instead of be like, I can't believe on top of everything else, somebody wet the bed, right? Which is how we normally, at least I normally operate without my spirituality.
Yeah. So you're obviously married to Jim, who happens to be a funny man. And as you were telling the story of the squirrel roaming through your house and everything, I was just chuckling to myself because I could only imagine that scene in your home. Can you talk to us a little bit about what role that humor has played in your family during difficult times, like during your entire going through the process with your brain tumor and your recovery? How has humor played into your family?
Well, I'm also very blessed that I am, married to like one of the funniest guys in the world.
Yeah.
And I have, kids that are funny. And I really, write about this is that in order to process a lot of grief, God gives us humor. He gives us the ability to look at things in the bigger picture. So I think that the squirrel story is also tied to humor, right? Mm-hmm. So you're able to go there. Now, obviously, there was nothing funny about when I got diagnosed with a brain tumor. And there's nothing funny about a coronavirus pandemic, right?
Right.
There's certain things that are happening. And there's certain things that, in retrospect especially, that I look back, and that's why I had to write on it, because it was, it was my way of dealing with the trauma, is talking about how really ironically funny it is to be in an MRI. There's just, it's like, it's so torturous. So some of these medical tests are like worse than the problem,
Right.
So it's not really like, funny, but it's like a way to process things. And I think that we've always, from the smaller things, such as, we were on a road trip at one point early on, and we totaled a car. And while we were waiting for the tow truck, Jim started doing this character. And at first I was like, how can you be doing this joke character when we're stuck in the middle of the Southwest with no, idea if the insurance is going to, but at a certain point, it touched me that he was helping me deal with the crisis through humor. And it got me in touch with a way through. So prayer, of course, because sometimes, things aren't funny. Like people die, it's not funny.
Right.
And then prayer is the way to understand the bigger picture. But in a lot of other situations, humor is a way to understand the bigger picture. So, for instance, even though there might be nothing funny that's going on in the ICU right now at Mount Sinai Hospital, like just, down the road, there is something funny about all of us being stuck at home, right?
Right.
So one of the things that we've done during this time, and I can't believe that we're still doing it, but it seems like something that people are really responding to. So now we have to. But right away, Jim put our family dinner on his YouTube channel, Dinner with the Gaffigans, right? So now we got such a response from the fact that people are, they need an outlet, right?
Right.
They just, they're crazy families interacting with each other. And so now I think we've done 25 straight days of Dinner with the Gaffigan. So every night at 6:00 at Eastern time on Jim's YouTube channel, you can have dinner with the Gaffigans. So invite you to sit down and have somebody eat with us. Now there's another element where we're raising money for, food pantries and other things that have been devastated by the coronavirus in New York, such as the lack of, ability to take breaks for the medical staff.
Mm-hmm.
We've been sending now PPE. We've been enriching some of the local food pantries that have dried up for volunteers and donations. And so we've made it this whole interactive thing where, my kids will do charades after dinner, and people in the YouTube will comment, give suggestions to my kids, and then they'll secretly look at it and act out it's become this whole really wonderful, funny thing.
Right.
Happened out of this terrible crisis. And, I talk about this in my book too. That's now, but when I was going through my recovery, it was really brutal. I was on a feeding tube. I had nothing by mouth for months. And I had to eat out of a feeding tube, and it was really horrible because it was like when I got discharged from the hospital, they took out the nasal gastric feeding tube that goes up your nose, down your stomach, and they inserted in my actual abdomen a hose.
Oh man!
Pump food through, and it was just like not like eating, but it was like to live. And I was just mortified. I was like, this is just horrible. And Jim made this whole bit about it. He made this show on his YouTube channel called Feeding Frenzy, where he would show everyone how he would mix the formula and shake it up like, a cocktail and use the syringe it is so funny. And you wouldn't believe the outpouring of gratitude that we got from a lot of people in like the dysphagia community and people who were like, thank you for normalizing this. I live this way.
Wow.
And now it's like this kind of funny, like dinner show, cooking show. And so we've always had a way of trying to turn things around to help cope with it, whether it's to help ourselves cope or to help other people cope on a larger level. And if God gave us this gift of creativity and humor, it's not just to be hidden for ourselves. It's to be shared with the world because it's family friendly and it's, we're all in this together. We're all in this together.
And Jeannie, I love what you mentioned there because finding the humor in challenging situations, like you said, it's not just to help you guys get through it, but as you shared, others who are struggling with similar difficulties or challenges in life, it helps them get through it as well. It allows them to kind of look at the brighter side of, often difficult things. And that's just kind of the beauty of not only our faith can be inspiring, but as you said, the opportunity to interject some humor can also be inspiring and encouraging to people. One of the things in the book that you have this really funny line about how your younger self could have been voted, and this is the quote, least likely to marry a comedian who sucked all the air out of my spotlight and have 5 kids with him. And in your writing, you allude to having to kind of adjust to being a wife and a mom and kind of feeling somewhat jealous of Jim at times. He was traveling a lot. He was involved in a lot of things. But when you were in ICU, you shared that you had this clarity about how well you and Jim worked together and how you really wanted to be able to do more of that. Can you talk to us a bit about what you've learned from these years of collaborating with your husband?
I've learned a big lesson about dying to myself. And I talk to a lot of people about and humility and gratitude. And I talk to a lot of people, only married men can understand this concept. But I talk a lot about the wedding dress concept. So when you're a kid or a teenager and you fantasize about your wedding, and you eventually get engaged and you think about your wedding dress, you have this picture of what your wedding dress is going to look like. And if you force yourself to stay with that picture, you're going to look ridiculous 90% of the time, because you might think that you want to look like Cinderella, or you're picturing a dress that is your idea of what your perfect dress is. And then, you hear the story about you put the dress on and it's like the one, and you're like, whoa, I never would have tried that dress on before. And I just really think about my vision of what my adult life was going to look like the wedding dress. Like, I had this whole idea of what kind of career I wanted to have, and what kind of husband I wanted to have, and what kind of, I had it all mapped out. My will be done. Right. And I think that when you are open to the Lord's plan, it's going to make your life a lot easier. Because if you're constantly fighting with what your vision of what your will is, you're going to be miserable. Because, I'm not saying sit in your room and say, okay, God, we're just waiting for you to tell me what to do now. I'm just saying that as you go along, you have to pray for the discernment to say yes to the things that God is asking you and giving you, and to say no to yourself.
That's such an important lesson to learn. And as you are, living your life, you and Jim, you work quite a bit together. And you're a writer, and you help with his specials, his comedy specials, and those types of things. You've even acted. I know you're in some of the episodes of My Boys, which was one of my wife Monica and I's favorite shows, by the way. But you guys working together, talk to me a little bit about husband and wife. How have you guys grown together over the years, and what advice would you give young people who are just kind of starting out in married life? What advice would you give that you and Jim have learned over the years?
We have a very unique situation that's not necessarily universal, because we are very blessed that we work together.
Right.
And I really feel like I don't know if I would have the same experience if I had a completely different career than my husband, because at a certain point we realized that we had to work together or we would never see each other, and we couldn't really build a bond, a family. We would grow apart. But for the in general though, I have the same communication issues as every other couple in the world. So one piece of advice I could give to those out there who are starting out is don't get divorced. That's my advice. Because there's a million reasons to get divorced. There's a million reasons to get divorced.
Right.
But what if you had to work it out? What if you looked at your marriage as a covenant?
Right.
And that, things don't always go your way. And you have to learn how to give and take and collaborate with somebody else. Because although, the two shall become one, it's one with two different brains and two different strong wills. So you have to remember that every hurdle, there's a way with love and forgiveness. Love and forgiveness. You have to go into your marriage with love and forgiveness at the forefront of your agenda.
Yeah, that's good. One of the things that you wrote about as well were both spiritual warriors and scientific warriors. This was during your brain tumor incident. Can you talk to us a little bit about the spiritual warriors who helped you through this time? And I believe one of them was your mother, correct?
Yeah, my mother definitely. My mother was the one who sowed the seeds of faith in me. And not to disparage my dad at all, but my mother was the one who always talked about God being part of everything. God was behind everything. And I think that even when I went through a rebellious period where I didn't really go to church,
right,
because I'd rather sleep in on Sunday morning, and when I was in college and nobody was telling me what to do, I always I never was like there. I never went through that, is there a God thing? Never. I don't know. And I really credit my mother with that, because even when I wasn't like, giving back to God at all, I really feel like he was always there. And I always feel like I had a connection where I would, have a dialogue, a conversation. Maybe not enough gratitude, maybe not enough, formal prayer, but I always felt God's presence in my life, and I credit my mom with that. Also, I'm glad you brought this up, because the biggest spiritual warrior for me in my my diagnosis was I call her my Aunt Marita, but she's actually my mom's first cousin. But because of her age, she was like a second grandmother to me. That's what there was, like, one of those big Irish Catholic families where the oldest is like 20 years older than the youngest.
Right.
So she was the age of my grandmother. So she was the one who had a life that was filled with, from the outside, filled with tragedy. So many sicknesses, deaths, lost her parents as a little girl. There were so many things that happened to her, and she had the strongest faith and the best attitude, and was a leader in prayer, and had the strongest faith. So when you would have something that seemed like it was insurmountable, you would just tell her, I don't know how I'm going to get out of this one. I don't know, why God is doing this to me or whatever. And she'd say, oh, have faith. Have faith. The Lord is holding you in the palm of his hand. She was one of those people that had this effect on, her name was Marita Haggerty, and she just passed away. And now she's advocating in heaven for all of us. And she was because I couldn't call my mom at the beginning, because I didn't know what was going to happen. So being a mother myself, I know that anything happens to one of my kids, it's going to be really, really hard on me. Right. So in my book, I joke about how, if you're a doctor, you don't deliver your spouse's baby, right? There's too much. So I didn't go to my mom initially for the prayers, because it was more like, pray that this isn't going to kill me. I don't know what it is. I'm waiting for the results, right? Right. And so it was the way that she had such absolute faith in God. And I am so grateful that I had someone like that in my life, and not someone who was just like, you never know, or, just someone who was not putting God in the forefront of the situation.
Yeah, what a gift! What a gift that is, Jeannie. It's been such a pleasure spending time with you and hearing your story, and how your faith has kind of carried you through, and how it's such a part of your family's life. I was curious, are there any final thoughts that you might want to leave with our listeners before we stop our conversation?
I just want to tell everyone that your experience right now is meaningful in some way in your life. And no matter how bad it is, or what you're going through, what you had to cancel, how sick you are, how close you are to someone who is suffering right now, no matter what is happening right now that seems insurmountable and painful, there is a bigger reason for it. And I would just ask everyone to read about the passion of Christ right now, this week, and see what God is trying to tell you. What is God trying to tell you about this thing that you're suffering in your life? What is he trying to form in you? And in my youth group, I'm the leader of a youth group, and I've started an interfaith youth group as well. I'm leader of a Catholic youth post-confirmation teen youth group, and I'm also part of a larger organization, the interfaith, all different faiths. Cool. It's called the Imagine Society. You can check us out at theimaginesociety.org. Right now, we're doing like 3 virtual volunteer jobs that people can sign up for if they go to theimaginesociety.org and go ahead and email me or look at our service page and see where you want to fit in. But one of the things that is happening right now is that the kids have to understand that this is an unprecedented historical moment in time, and we are being led to do something. We don't know what it is yet. So every week I ask for everyone to talk about their thorn, their rose, and their bud. What is the painful thing right now? What is the beauty that you can find in it? And what is the promise? Future? What is the bud? What could bloom out of this? And where do I fit into this big picture? And that's what I'd like to leave people with.
That is so good, Jeannie. So good. Beautiful stuff. I want to encourage everyone to check out Jeannie's book, When Life Gives You Pears. And we will have links to the book and to your YouTube channel so people can jump in to dinner with you guys and the organizations that you shared as well in the show notes. So, Jeannie, such a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for sharing your story of faith. Super encouraging. Great insights for all of us in a time where we really need to focus on the hope that's offered to us through Christ. So thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
God bless you.
God bless you too.
I appreciate you taking the time to be with us on this week's episode. Every week as we are putting the episodes together, we're thinking of you, our pastors and ministry leaders, and striving to provide insightful and inspiring interviews as you seek to grow as a kingdom leader. So we hope you're finding value from the Church Leaders podcast. And if so, we'd certainly appreciate you taking a few moments to head over to iTunes and leave us a review. Your positive reviews and ratings help other church leaders more easily find our podcasts so they too can benefit from these interviews. Again, we thank you in advance, and if you have any comments, any questions, suggestions, or ideas for guests, I would love to hear from you. You can send me an email to podcast@ChurchLeaders.com, or you can connect with me on Twitter. Finally, you can find this podcast as well as other great faith-based podcasts on the FaithPlay app. It's available for both Apple and Android, and so we encourage you to check that out as well. So until next time, this is Jason Day, encouraging you to love well and lead well.
You've been listening to the Church Leaders Podcast. For articles, videos, and free resources that will help you lead better every day, visit our website at ChurchLeaders.com. Thanks for listening.